Hi, this is Julia. This is before the podcast bit. Sorry, this episode is so long. It's a lot. Anyway, we just wanted to chime in and give a disclaimer. We're going to be spoiling the heck out of the film Music by Sia, and we are also going to be talking about some like dark and disturbing stuff in regards to like the restraint part. That part's more towards the end, but we just want to say if you don't want to like, maybe we'll try and put the time codes in. So like if you don't want to hear us talking about the restraint, which is a part of aspect of this film, which is absolutely a lot, then it'll be there and you can skip. But anyway, enjoy the episode. Bye.
Bye. 3, 2, 1. Hello.
Hi. Good morning. Afternoon, actually. This comes out on noon. Good morning. Good morning. How is your high school theater teacher's wife's cousin?
How are they? Also, how would you know that person?
That's true. I don't know. Just Facebook stalk them and then let us know how they are. Anyway, okay, so I guess we're really excited about this week's topic, so we're just going to get right into it. I think, we're not going to talk about our weeks, so just assume we both had the worst week ever. No,
honestly, kind of. No.
Oh, no, I'm sorry.
After watching this movie, it got worse after watching this movie.
Yes, okay.
So this is like our first movie. I guess it's not really a movie review because we're talking
kind
about
of it's
this,
more like
it's kind of, but we're gonna go ahead.
We're going to talk about music, which is basically this. We want to talk about this film because we also wanted to have a conversation about autism and autism representation. I'm autistic. Heather super isn't. But I guess, to give some context. So Music is a film directed by Sia, the musician. She did Chandelier, whatever. It came out in 2021 this year. I think February, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So it's been like a month since it came out. Maybe less than a month, actually. But it's about a recovering addict who becomes a caretaker of her autistic sister with high support needs. I watched it like a week ago. Heather just watched it last night for this episode.
No, I finished it this morning. Like an hour ago. Yeah.
Right,
because I couldn't sit and do it all in one sitting. I just had to. It's just a lot to digest. Whether you like it or not, it's just hard to watch.
Exactly. I actually ended up, the only reason I wanted to watch it is because I'm a senior in college at the moment. I'm writing a capstone about autistic representation in media. So that was one of the films I watched recently because it literally just came out and it was like perfect timing. I'm gonna rip it apart in my essay.
Right.
We thought it would be a good idea to talk about on the podcast because it's something I'm very interested in. Heather can bring a perspective of like kind of devil's advocate and kind of start that kind of discussion for any neurotypical people that watch this film that might not understand why it's so damaging,
right,
and why it shouldn't have been made.
Right, and to make it clear, we're gonna be having a conversation on it, right? But the only opinion that really matters in this virtual room is yours, right? It's like my opinion doesn't really matter.
Your opinion is trash.
It is trash. No, because I mean, because this is like, you want to give voice to the people that this actually affects, right?
Yeah.
So I'm not here to be like, make my stance as a neurotypical person and speak over you. Tried to go into the film as a person who isn't connected to the autistic community, even though I am, because you are autistic and we grew up together, right? Mm-hmm. I tried to go into it and ask questions that one who didn't know anything about this would say, so we could have that conversation in like a safe space, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Instead of like somebody saying like, oh, why are you so butthurt about these movies? And you're like, well, shut up, you stupid idiot.
Totally. Yeah, so basically if Heather asks any questions that are offensive, it's literally just because she's playing devil's advocate and trying to start the conversation. Heather's not a bad person.
I am obviously like connected to the autistic community, but what I have to say is nowhere near as important as what you have to say. Yeah. So I'm just going to try to be like a mediator and a devil's advocate and pose questions to you that might sound like I were on Sia's side for this.
Yeah.
For the record, did not like this movie.
We'll get into it, absolutely. Let's just go. I have one more disclaimer, just really quick, but like, I just want to say that like, I'm an autistic person with low support needs. You know, I grew up with this isn't like a real diagnosis anymore, thankfully, but I was diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome, which is considered mild autism, quote unquote, but like, that's not a great label. So low support needs is what I would say, but I should but I should clarify that like, this film is about a autistic person with high support needs, so like there might be some things that in this film that I would consider bad representation, but like other autistic people like might, you know, relate to it more. It's just that autistic community is like a very diverse community. Like if you've met one person with autism, you've only met one person with autism. Like another example is like, I don't know, Sheldon Cooper from The Big Bang Theory. Right. He's not, you know, he's never been said to have autism, but he's heavily coded to be autistic. And some autistics, like, really like that, and they like his character. But, like, on the complete other side of it, I hate his character. Yeah. I think he's terrible representation for various reasons. But I think that's important to note. Like, something that I think is bad representation, or, like, not, or something that I wouldn't relate to personally might be relatable to someone that does have more high support needs and who is nonverbal, that kind of thing. So I just want to say that last thing before we get into it. Okay.
And for the record, I might say, I don't know, would you consider yourself, this is kind of a little bit off topic, but in your like childhood, you definitely were more high support needs, and over time you've become more low support needs. Are you going to try to bring in some of those experiences into the discussion? Or I don't know.
You know, that's a good question. I feel like you've asked me that on the podcast before, and like the more I think about it, the more I'm like, when we're talking about like low support needs, high support needs, I think like it can range a lot. Like I don't think, like I was never nonverbal as a child really, and like I think that's important to know. And I think
when you were a baby, a toddler, you were.
I guess.
Mom,
yeah. Well, okay. Well, I would argue everyone is high support needs when they're a toddler, because they can't do anything. They can't pay taxes. They can't buy groceries.
You know what, Julia? I guess that's fair.
No, sorry. What I'm actually trying to say is, like, I think depending on whatever situation you put an autistic person in, they can need more support and they can need less support. Like day to day it can vary, like year to year it can vary. I don't know. I guess you could say that, but it's also, there's a lot of nuance, and like there's some things that, I don't know, there's some things that certain autistic people can do without a problem, and there's some things that like autistic people require a lot of support with, if that makes sense. Right. And it really varies depending on the person. It's a very nuanced thing of like, I don't know how to explain it, but yeah, words are hard. I don't know if that answered your question.
No, I see what you're saying. I want to be clear in that maybe as a younger child you might have had experiences more
struggles. Yeah, I suppose.
Right, but just to say, like, you're not completely blind to what it could potentially be like to be a high support needs autistic individual, I guess. But obviously, you know, you know what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. Okay, but, sorry. Let's get into it.
Can I quickly just share my first gripe?
Oh, totally. Yes, of course.
Thank you. Thank you very much. This has nothing to do with the movie. I'm absolutely pissed. First of all, Sia made enough money with this from just being Sia. She did not need to charge $7 to rent this stupid thing on YouTube. Are you kidding me? $7? Yeah. You can rent things for like $4 on YouTube. Why was it $7? Who wants to pay $7 to what? Okay.
Yeah, I should. Okay, this is not me defending Sia, but I don't think this has anything to do with Sia, but I think that has nothing to do with her or the film or anything. I think that's literally because it's like a brand new film.
Yeah,
and I think especially now with like, you know, the way like on demand, like, not as many theaters have been open for the past year because of COVID. So like it's literally a matter of like on demand films that like just come out and are available digitally are more like expensive. So I think that's the reason.
No, yeah.
I definitely hear you though. It's not great. It's not ideal. I'm very sorry you have spent so much money on renting this film on YouTube. But yeah, no, I definitely think I agree with, I like the vibe. We should definitely start with like our petty gripes with it first, and then we can go into the more serious. Yeah, exactly. Because I have a lot of petty gripes because I think it's just a weird film in general. Like even the little things are just like, so anyway, we're gonna start with our petty like gripes with it, and then we'll get into the more serious, dark, dangerous stuff about it. But right now we're just gonna be light to warm up. I want to say one of the first notes I made was, oh my god, their names are kazoo and music. That's hilarious.
Are you kidding me? Okay, yeah, you're right. We're gonna roast it for a little bit.
Yeah,
just
exactly.
To get it out. This is not us just being, bashful of it just for the purpose of being bashful. We have educational things to say. We have intelligent things to say. But
yes, also kazoo is a stupid name.
It is a stupid name. I hate it. I couldn't actually believe that her name was Kazoo. I thought she was joking at first. Like, Zoo is kind of cute. Like, I get it, but like. The larger problem was why. Okay, first of all, it was the grandma that was taking care of music, right? It wasn't the mother.
Yes, I think that's right. Yeah.
Who the hell was the mother, and why did she just choose to like? They don't even touch on that at all. Like, why did this mom name her daughter Kazoo?
It's like, very weird. Yeah, it's bonkers. Also, something else I want to say. Again, music is a very heavy motif in the film, but like something I want to say is like, this film was kind of advertised like I think initially as a musical. Like, unfortunately, it was nominated for Golden Globes. I don't remember. I think the Golden Globes just happened, but I don't know if it actually won anything, if it was just nominated. But it was in the musical category. I think there was a comedy musical. It was on the musical category.
Yeah.
This is not a musical.
No, it is 100% not.
Like, okay, listen, I'm kind of a theater nerd. I was like in a lot of musicals in high school. I'm not a very good actor, but like, I was part of the theater community in high school, all that stuff, and I was in a lot of musicals. But like, a musical is very clearly when like there are multiple songs in the film and like all the characters are like singing on screen, but like this is just such a weird, like these just have these weird these weird dance sequences, and sometimes it's Leslie Odom Jr. singing, or sometimes it's Kate Hudson singing, but like they're not singing on screen. I think there were like 2 or 3 times where any characters are actually singing on screen. Anyway, that just bugged me because it's like this is as like just gatekeeping in the musical theater community, but this is not a musical. It's just so weird. And I'll get into why those like dance sequences are just so much and like not kind of problematic. But in general, it's not a musical. It's not a musical.
No, I totally understand that, because I didn't even realize it was categorized as a musical until after I watched it.
Yeah,
because. Yeah, you're right. When I think of musical, I think of, we are characters and we sing, like, there are songs that are telling the story, that are representative of the story. This just sounds like, okay, there's a little bit of plot here, and then there's a music video, and then there's a little bit of plot here, and then a music. Like, they're very much, like, cut weirdly. Like, they don't need to happen where they happen. Sure, there may be a few instances where it would like kind of make sense, like when the boy is shining the light on her wall and she whatever.
Oh yeah. Oh my god. You listen, I gotta talk about that really quick. This honestly, this isn't in my petty so I have, my notes are like, I divided them up like roughly into like 3 categories: petty, bad, and worse. But no, I think that was in my bad category. Literally. Okay, so that part where, like, she's, like, trying to fall asleep, and then the boy is, like, from across the street in the apartment next door is shining a light through her window, and she seems to be really entranced by it and think it's really cool, and, like, she's giggling and think it's really cool. That drives me, that was just so confusing to me. Like, why is she enjoying that, right? Like, listen, Heather, you can attest to this, but, like, when we shared a room, or, like, when we were kids and, like, we would go on vacation with our family and we would share a hotel room or something, yep. We always fought about this because you always wanted to, this isn't me calling you out, it's fine, but, like, you always wanted to have some sort of nightlight on, and I'm like, I can't do that. I can't fall asleep unless it's complete darkness, because my eyes are too sensitive to any kind of light in the room, right?
Yeah. No, we did fight about that a lot.
Yeah.
Which, first of all, anybody who doesn't want to sleep with a nightlight is kind of a serial killer.
I'm not a serial killer. I'm just sensitive to light. If there's any light in the room while I'm trying to fall asleep, I'm not going to be able to fall asleep because I won't be able to get it out of my head.
Get it. No,
yeah, it's so weird. But yeah, that's one of the examples of, like, it makes me feel like that there wasn't any actual thought put into like it feels like Sia just made this movie to fit into her personal aesthetic, but like not to actually represent the autistic community well, because that's something that, like, I would not be excited or like entranced if like there was a light shining in my room. I would be annoyed as hell because I wouldn't be able to fall asleep.
Which,
it's like,
not to mention that photosensitivity, like, warning, that was like flashing lights.
Yeah.
Not ready for that, not prepared for that. you know, I mean, maybe that's just me being hypersensitive to the fact that this is just a blatant mockery of disability in general, right?
Yeah.
And maybe I'm being a little bit too sensitive to that. But in general, when I saw that made me feel weird. And
are you talking about the opening sequence?
No. I'm talking about in that same scene.
Oh, yeah, you're right.
Flashing light. Like, once she starts to go into, like, her brain, and it's, like, the dog, and then, like, her pink dress. There's, like, a lot of flashing light. Like, the boy is, like, you know, hitting the button over and over again or whatever, right? But I feel like in general, one of the gripes that I have is there are a lot of, like, oversensitivity things that occur. Like, that is an example of that. Also, in another scene, I can't remember exactly. Oh, it's towards the end of the movie when what is it? When Zoo is, like, throwing a bunch of stuff because she's really angry because of whatever, you know.
Is it when she's drunk, or was it when?
Yes, right before she gets drunk. She's throwing stuff because she lost her bag. The music in the background is super disorienting and stressful. Like, the sound of the buzzing phone, like, is, like, incorporated into the score, and it like makes me feel weird. It, like, made it, like, hurt my brain to listen to it. And it's like, if you're, I don't know, that made me feel weird. Fair. I feel like there's a lot of, like, overstimulation aspects, especially like in the colors. We'll talk about that later, but that is something that made me feel weird. It's like you are writing a story about a disabled individual, essentially, and then constantly throwing overstimulation into the aesthetic of the film.
That's a good point, because, like, that was something Sia mentioned, like, in the initial promotional stuff for the movie, is, like, she said this was, like, a love letter to the autistic and disabled community or something ridiculous. And it was, like, there are a million, like, that's a good reason why that's absolutely not the case. Like, this movie was clearly not made for neurodiverse people, and, like, that's a big point, because, like, if you actually cared about the autistic community, then, and, like, you wanted to make a film for them, you wouldn't include sensory overload things in this film that would make them, if you can't make a film for an audience that wouldn't be able to watch it because it's too overwhelming physically. Like, it makes me think about, even in, like, the opening sequence, this isn't my worst category, but even in the opening sequence, and the sequence you were just talking about as well with the dog and stuff, again, like I said, I have very low support needs, so I was able to watch this film, like, kind of okay without, like, becoming too overwhelmed myself. But I will say the opening sequence was, like, it was a lot. Like, specifically, I noticed a lot of flashing lights, specifically the editing was just so, like, choppy and, like, disorienting and stuff, like, with music, like, dancing with all these girls and, like, all these different people, and these bright colors, and that was just the editing is just so choppy. It made me think about, it made me want to rewatch Chandelier, just that music video, and just, because I could remember if, like, for whatever reason, I remembered it, like, oh, I wonder if that was, like, had really choppy editing, or if it was, like, shot with one take. But then I rewatched it, and it's not in one take, but it's a dancing video, but it's edited much more smoothly and, like, less overwhelming, if that makes sense. It's a lot less in your face and a lot less overwhelming to watch. And it was just interesting, because, like, there are a lot of dance sequences like that, but I feel like a lot of them are, like, very disorienting to watch, part of it because the editing is so choppy and, like, the lighting is so aggressive, and it's just it's a lot. It's just too much.
Yeah, it's very much like, and it's frustrating because I think, I mean, this is kind of later on some of my ending thoughts, but I think that I understand what she's kind of trying to do, right? She's trying to romanticize music and basically tell this story about an autistic individual who looks at the world in a different way, right? Who looks at the world in color and in a way that not everybody else looks at the world. It was an excuse for her to be creative in her, you know, music video, I guess, surroundings, whatever. But that, I guess I don't know what my point is.
Yeah, no, I got you.
Disturbing.
I mean, yeah, that's a good point. I'm going to talk more about, like, what's the word you said? Romanticization in a second. Yeah. I'll quickly go over again. We got a little serious for a second, but I'll go over, like, some more of my lighter, like, more petty gripes with it. Just really quickly, but, like, this is just a weird line that I noticed, but, like, I remember, like, I don't know. This is nothing to do with actually the movie, but at one point the grandma is like, she was looking at popsicle sticks and like funny like anecdotes on popsicle sticks, and one of the things she saw was like 7 is the only number between 1 and 10 with 2 syllables. Huh, that's right. That's crazy. And look, I like the grandma. We don't get to spend much time with her. She's probably very sweet, but it was like so weird. It was.
How did you not know that?
Yeah, how did you not know that? Like she was like, that's so interesting.
That's so funny.
I don't know. It just made me laugh because it was kind of goofy and weird. Also, look, and this is just me roasting Sia because like I hate her, but like also this is more of a sign of her kind of being this is her debut film. This is the first film she's ever directed. But like the content, I'm not saying there had a lot of continuity issues. I'm saying it had one continuity issue specifically that bothered me because like as soon as Zoo got to Music's place, and I think it was our first night there, and like she was on the phone with like a caretaker or like someone who was at like a home, like I don't know how to articulate it, like a mental health facility or a facility for like neurodiverse people to live. She was just like, she was having a conversation with her and she was like, hey, can I drop her off, yada yada, being rude. But here's the problem, she was painting her nails, like she was like straight up painting her toenails, and then like a couple shots later, like she leans back in the bed and she's wearing those knee-high socks she was wearing before, and that was driving me crazy. I had to watch it like 3 times. I was like, oh my god, that's such a big continuity issue.
Stop. Oh my god, I didn't even notice that, but you're so right.
Yeah. Again, like she's a debut director, I get it, but also I hate her and I hope she never makes another film again after this. So
this is why I'm trying to be the mediator. Because I can tell you're really upset. I don't blame you, for the record. It's not like I'm trying to tell you that you shouldn't be upset. I think you should be upset, right? But I'm trying to, from my perspective, I'm trying to look at it as if I was like, oh, cool, Sia's making a movie. I like Sia. I like her music. So I not understanding anything about it.
Yeah.
And it's funny that you're just like, I hate her. I hope she never does anything ever again. But God. I can't blame you for feeling that way because she's basically romanticized and stereotyped your entire
identity,
your identity,
exactly. And like, I'm not saying people can't change and like stuff, and maybe she has admitted that what she did was ableist, and good, that's a good step in the right direction. Maybe, I don't know, I just think this film shouldn't have been made in the first place. Maybe that she shouldn't make any movies ever again, but I feel like this film in particular should not exist. Anyway, so I'll get into more like petty stuff, but like I just have a note that's like, oh god, Leslie, LOL, why? Because Leslie Odom Jr. is in this film, and if you don't know, do you know who Leslie Odom Jr. is?
Yes, he's in Hamilton.
Yes, he's Aaron Burr in Hamilton. He sings my favorite song in Hamilton. Wait for it. It's called Wait for It. I love that song more than anything. It's my favorite song in the whole musical, and he's in this film, and it makes me really sad. And again, like I'm not gonna really judge. I don't want to judge any of the actors in this film for being a part of this film. We'll talk about Maddie Ziegler in a second. But in general, like I don't think there's anything wrong with like most of the actors in this film. Like, I mean, they're just doing their jobs. It's their job. It's their job to trust the director, and it's not their fault if the director is telling a really problematic story, I guess, or that kind of thing.
No, absolutely. I think that it does not fall as much on the actors as it does on the director, because they should trust that Sia had done her research, had talked to the right people, had taken the care to understand the autistic community before trying to represent it in a film, right?
Yeah,
I don't think it's necessarily the actor's fault.
Yeah,
because
exactly.
Also, there are also contracts that are tied into that potentially. Yeah. What is it? Maddie Ziegler?
I think it's Ziegler. I might be wrong though, but I think it's the Ziegler.
Who knows? She might have had a contract with Sia that forced her to do the movie, even if she didn't feel comfortable. I don't know anything about that. I'm not saying that's true or not. That's a possibility, right? I don't know exactly I don't think she's really commented on the situation at all.
Yeah.
I think she just made the movie. Because I think her and Sia have worked together for 10 years.
Yes, I'll get into their relationship in a second. Not deeply, but a little bit later. But yeah, that is interesting. I should say, too, like, a couple other things that I was thinking, like, this is more like almost positive notes I had, but like sure. I noticed that like I thought that it was cool that I think this was after Zoo began to live with Zoo began to live with music. Ebo, I believe his name is Ebo, Leslie Odom Jr.'s character helps set up Ebo. Like this communication app on her iPad where she can like press buttons, say yes, no, cool, like I'm sad, I am happy, that kind of thing. And I was like, oh, that's really cool. I'm glad they're trying to be accessible to this character, but it also, this isn't really a big thing, but I was also wondering why she didn't have that in the first place. And I guess I could, for the story, I could give the benefit of the doubt. Like, yeah, I mean, she was living with her grandmother, who was a very good caretaker of her and understood everything about her. She also seems to live in a very safe environment. Like, literally, like on her, like one of the first scenes we see her in, like she's just going on her morning walk, and all of the neighbors are really nice. I think like are very kind to her, and like she doesn't seem to like she seems to be in a very safe environment with like a supportive community around her, which I think that was nice. I mean, it was, you know, it seems like she's very happy where she lives. Like even like the newspaper guy, I think like he found like some like a newspaper or a couple pictures of dogs, and it seems like that's one of her special interests is like dogs, which in general I kind of liked that. I don't know if everyone else would agree with me, but I think it's good that you're showing an autistic character who's around a very supporting, like lovable like community. Like I feel like a lot of times, at least in like older films that depict autism, I think, sorry, I bumped my mic. Like it's often seen as like a burden, and it kind of is when Zoo comes into the picture. Like it's like music is like her burden, which is really annoying. But in general, this whole entire film isn't a depiction of like, oh my god, music is so sad and like her life is so hard because she's disabled and stuff. It seems like her community really cares about her and loves her and wants her to be okay. And it's not until Zoo comes into the picture and she kind of stands out in the fact that she's like, oh my god, I gotta take care of my autistic sister, this is so annoying. But anyway, that was something I guess I enjoyed about it. Anyway, but going back to the app, like, yeah, I guess it is kind of weird how she didn't have that app on her iPad before, but at the same time she did have an environment around her that seemed to like to understand her and care about her, which I thought was kind of nice at the beginning.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I guess talking more like about Zoo and how it was interesting because like, you know, you kind of, this film is kind of set up to where you assume music is the main character. And here's the thing, I went into this like with some understanding that like Zoo, like her older sister, was gonna focus more on her, and that's totally fine. Like it seems like they were trying to go for like Rain Man, but like for girls. Where, you know, like I haven't rewatched Rain Man in a while, but it's about an older brother who learns he has an autistic, developmentally disabled brother, all this stuff. And you know, and I guess it's no big deal. I just thought it was interesting how like they set it up to where like, you know, the first sequence music is dancing around and stuff, and like you meet music and you see her morning routine and you see her walking through her neighborhood and stuff, and then as soon as her grandmother dies, it feels like as soon as Zoo steps into the picture, it feels like she's suddenly the main character, which I thought was interesting. I'm not saying that every autistic character in a piece of media has to be the protagonist, and that's fine, but it just felt weird how like, you know, you name a film after a character and you begin to assume we're going to be learning more about this character, but then as soon as her older neurotypical sister steps into the picture, it's like her story all of a sudden. So it was weird.
Or even that is the film is almost implying that Zoo needs to speak for music, which
exactly. Yeah, it's
problematic.
Yeah, right? Exactly. It's kind of like, it's just weird. It's how do I trick it? It's like, it's more like the film is introducing us to this character who like, hey, this is music. She's gonna be very important to the real main character who's gonna teach her a lesson on how to like be a better sister. And it's like, oh, okay. That's definitely a reoccurring theme in like neurodiverse media, where it's like the autistic character is like the support. It's like they're the one that teaches the main character how to be a good person, and it's like, okay, that's outright. That's a lot to unpack.
That's not your existence. That's
exactly.
Not your point in life. That's not your purpose in life.
Right? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Anyway,
it's crazy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. One more thing in the light category of my notes that I want to touch on.
Sure.
I guess this was just something I found interesting and I have mixed opinions about, but there's a scene where Ebo, who is a neighbor, and he has lived with, like, he's lived, like, across down the hall from Music, like, since she's been living there and the grandma had been living there. So, but it was interesting because, like, like, Ebo and Zoo and Music are, like, walking through a park or something, and Ebo is, like, telling, this, like, almost halfway through the film, and he's, like, he's teaching Zoo, the sister, all about, Music's autism, which is interesting because, like, I think my first note was like, my first note was like, how does a neighbor know more about how autism works than the older sister? But I guess I can give it the benefit, but part of me wants to give it the benefit of the doubt, part of me doesn't, because I understand Zoo hasn't been living with Music for, like, a long time. Like, she's an older adult, she's like probably an older millennial or something, and the Music is like 18, but at the same time they grew up together. And I guess in general, like, with, like, siblings with larger age gaps, it is harder to connect with them, so maybe I should just give it the benefit of the doubt. But it just seems weird that she seems to be surprised by everything he says. Like he mentions, like, Music can hear whispering from 2 rooms away, and he also, I thought his explanation for delayed processing was interesting. Like, he mentioned something about, like, when you talk to Music, she hears you, but she stores that away, and then she actually processes it for, like, 3 weeks later, which I thought was interesting. And again, this is a film about a autistic person with more high functioning needs, so I might understand. So it's more like, I don't know if that's accurate to how high functioning people process information, if they genuinely don't process information for 3 weeks, or if it's more like, or if it's just a gross exaggeration, because I experience delayed processing every day. Like, it's kind of like sometimes people will be talking to me and I'll have to ask them to repeat what they said, not because I didn't hear them, but because I didn't process what they said, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Yeah, and the same thing was, like, you know, she can hear whispering from 2 rooms away. I have very sensitive hearing. Honestly, for me, like, my hearing is almost more sensitive to my eyesight, because I'm less sensitive to, like, I guess I'm a little bit sensitive to bright lights, but I'm a lot more sensitive to hearing, if that makes sense. Yeah. Like, it's very interesting. It was interesting. But that, I think, at the same time, while it's good that he was kind of breaking it down for this character and kind of trying to help her raise her better, I think this film, how, like, CM supposedly made this as a love letter for the autistic community. She did not. And another example of why that's not true is because this film is very clearly breaking down how autism works. The autistic community knows how autism works. We deal with it every day. Like, you don't need to break it, you know, and I think that's a very telltale sign that this film was made for a neurotypical audience that doesn't understand, that just wants some inspiration porn, you know what I mean?
Yes,
I think that was an important thing to note.
Right, and to go back to your point about how Ebo was explaining to Zoo, I mean, might I argue that was just Sia's way of explaining to the audience what was wrong with Music, you know? Like, it could just be her way of explaining to the audience, but also at the same time, it's kind of misplaced, because you're right, you know, Zoo should at least have a general understanding of her. Maybe it's like a thing where she's lost it over time. I don't know, you know. Right. I guess it's just confusing, but
yeah, it's really confusing.
I think that moment was more so for the audience and less so for Zoo. Yeah. But at the same time, it's, I mean, again, that's exactly right. Like, the autistic community already knows how that works. Like, you don't need to explain it in your movie if it's really a love letter to the autistic. I think that's a really good point.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's everything I had in, like, my petty section, and I can move on, but, like, do you have any other, like, thoughts before, petty, like, gripes with the film before we moved on to, like, some more serious stuff?
I do, but I guess it's kind of confusing because I actually have mine in chronological order.
Oh, okay. Like, that's true. Yeah, I've been talking a lot. You can talk a little bit more if you want.
One thing that I could bring up, which is actually something that my boyfriend brought up because he watched it with me, and I thought was a super funny point. I can't remember what it was. I think one of my petty gripes was, you know, at the very beginning of the movie, they really hammer in that Music has, like, this schedule, you know. She needs the eggs with the ketchup every single morning. She needs to go on her morning walk. She needs to come home. She needs to do this. She needs to go to bed at a certain time, blah, blah, blah. And then as soon as they establish that, about 3 seconds later, they take her out of that. They take her out of her schedule to go to the boxing ring and to go get, what is it called? The ice stuff.
Yeah, like a snow cone or something?
Yeah, like,
yeah.
Immediately after doing that, they just, they use music as just kind of like a tail for their conversation. And they can go and do whatever they want, right? But it completely establishes that she needs a type of schedule in her life. And then as soon as it's not convenient anymore, they immediately take her out of that. And then they only use her as, you know, she's just like a tail for their conversation. Yeah. She's just kind of tagging behind them, and she's fine with everything that happens. You know, even Zoo takes music to their drug deal. You know what I mean?
Oh my God, yeah, that was so
much. They establish that she needs a schedule, and then as soon as that isn't convenient, they take her out of that schedule, and then they just use her as just like, oh, this is music, and she's here, and she's acting as like a conflict in our story. You know what I mean? Like,
that's a really good
point. In the drug scene, where it's like she goes, and then the music is like playing with the hair and, you know, being crazy and weird, and it's like you're treating her like an inconvenience just because you're just using her as a plot point, I guess. I thought that was ridiculous.
That was a really good point, because like that is, I think that's something I forgot to mention, but like that is like a big part of autistic identity is like, you know, schedule and like routine and like that kind of thing. And that's something that like I've found that like a lot, maybe not all, but like a lot of films about autism seem to get right. But it's also like one of the basic things. But like even in this film, like as soon as, you're right, as soon as it wasn't convenient anymore, they just like, you know, it's fine, we'll just take her to do this or do that and whatever. Right. So just really weird.
Very weird. Yeah. I guess I have a lot of different points. It's just different, I guess. I really think we should just talk about, I really
why was there blackface in this film?
Yeah.
that really came out of left field. Like I
didn't immediately clock it as blackface necessarily, but the very beginning orange scene, the orange music video, and she's got like the really dark braids that are also her headphones, and then her.
That was
so
really
that's what
weird.
You're referring to in terms of blackface. I'm not sure if I should.
I guess I didn't clock it initially either, but it wasn't until like I saw more articles online about it that I realized, oh my God, that was definitely blackface. And it's it was
disturbing.
It was really disturbing. It should not have been there. I don't even know why. I don't even know if Sia's offered an explanation for that, because there isn't like a good explanation for it. That just came out of nowhere, because like maybe she just wanted it to fit her aesthetic, but like that was extremely inappropriate and unacceptable. And again, that should not be in this film. That should be in any film. That shouldn't be in anything ever.
Absolutely.
It just felt like another like aesthetic choice, and it's like, you know, someone's skin color is not an aesthetic choice that you can just put on for your music video,
right? And I suppose that opens up a broader conversation about like Caucasian individuals wearing African American hairstyles.
Yeah,
you know, obviously both of us are white. You know?
Yes,
we can't really speak on that, but I thought that it was I don't know exactly what to say about it, because that's not my realm. That can't be my realm. That physically can't. We can talk about, you know, autistic communities all we want, but we can't speak on that. But
that's
I think
true.
It's important to bring it up. I don't want to say anything insensitive about
that.
That's
true. But I completely agree. Like I think we can say that that's wrong and it's not okay, but it is important to understand we are both coming from a place of privilege, absolutely. And like
it would be very easy for us to just be like, oh, she's just wearing braids, right?
It would be easy for us to not even talk about it in this episode, like, oh, that doesn't apply to us, and it doesn't. But I also think it's important for us to say that that's wrong and that should not be a thing that happens anymore ever.
Do you think that was, I mean, I suppose I don't know a whole lot about Sia's aesthetic. I'm not like a super fan of Sia's
me
music,
neither,
right?
Honestly. Like I know I don't know if she's ever done that before, but honestly, if she has, like, let us know. But like I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but like I don't know. It was definitely a lot, and it was completely inappropriate, and it was just terrible.
Yeah, it definitely felt unnecessary, but I'll get into it later. But I feel like a lot of aspects of this movie are unnecessary, right?
A lot, absolutely.
We'll get into that. But where do you want to go next? Do you want to go chronologically? Do you want to talk about your bad category? How do you want to go about the conversation?
Words are hard. You can, like, why don't you make like a couple more points, and then I'll get more into my bad category.
So if I were totally unaware of what was going on, I would think, oh, music is such a sweet girl, right? From a diegetic perspective, she's just a non-verbal autistic individual, right? Like there isn't anything weird or bad about that in the context of the film. It's just all romanticized. It definitely depicts it's like a gross romanticization of the autistic experience, right? Which I suppose if you're making a movie about a character when you're really just focusing on the artistic elements of your music videos, you don't care about what that part of it, you know what I mean? You don't care about it. Would have been so easy to tell the story she wanted to tell without the autistic element. I don't want that to sound like I'm saying, oh, you don't need to make autistic representation in media. That's not what I'm trying to say. Obviously we want autistic representation in media, but from this perspective, she was not trying to tell a story about autism. She was trying to tell a story about how maybe in her brain she looks at the world through music glasses, right? She looks like those rose-colored glasses, you know what I mean? She chose to make that choice of her being autistic, but it could have just been about a young child who needed a guardian, or a teenager with social anxiety, or like a quiet teen, you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's true.
Her being autistic didn't add anything to the story. Not only did it massively discounted Sia's vision for what she wanted to say about music as a general thing, but at the same time it also just mocked an entire community of individuals, you know what I mean? I guess that made me feel weird, because she didn't need, again, we want autistic representation in media, but we don't want gross, romanticized, stereotypical representations of autism in media. I guess that's just something that made me feel weird, but
yeah, absolutely. I definitely agree that like like the romanticism was, like you've mentioned a lot, but like it's really heavy in this film. Like a lot of the things, like there are a lot, like one of the lines in the film is like, oh, your sister is a magical girl who needs your care now, and like, she sees the world in a completely different way than us, and like you said, and I think that's based on the research I've done for my capstone essay. That's a really big reoccurring theme in like the history of autistic representation, is like just very much romanticizing it, and and this can range anywhere between like thinking literally that autism is synonymous with being a magical hyper intelligent being, or just like being like having a mind that like you're a prodigy, you're like being a prodigy and like super smart, like Rain Man's a good example. Like he's like he can memorize numbers and things. Again, I haven't like rewatched that film specifically in a while. I'm going to, but that seems to be his whole thing. Like, from what I remember about it, like his brother takes him to a casino because he can remember numbers so well. I think that's right. I think so.
I've never seen Rain Man.
Never?
Seen it,
no.
Oh,
I think my parents showed it to me when I was pretty little. Like a couple, they also showed me Temple Grandin, which, that film is actually, I'm probably not going to mention that in my essay, because that's based on an actual autistic person, Temple Grandin, obviously.
Wait a minute. What is Temple Grandin? You just brought up such a, repressed memory in my brain. What the hell is that? I can't remember.
Temple Grandin is, she's an autistic woman. She, from what I remember, she's a real person that existed. I think she's still alive today, but she reinvented, I'm trying to remember exactly. She reinvented agriculture and stuff. That's a broad statement. She invented more humane ways to execute cows, basically, for dairy farms and stuff. But because that's what her special interest is, animals. She grew up on a farm, and she she saw how the animals are being treated. So she grew up, and she she has a lot of college education. She might have a master's degree, honestly. She basically went through a lot of higher education and that kind of thing. Basically, there was a film made about her, and that's what I watched, and you probably watched that as well.
I did watch it, but I literally had no memory of it until you said those two words. I was like, and then I do kind of remember bits and pieces of it. I guess it came out in 2010, so it's been 11 years probably since I watched it. But we probably went to see it because whatever.
Yeah.
It's funny though. I totally
I just unearthed like a no, that's funny. But yeah, that was something where like I don't think that was a bad film by any means. I think, it was interesting. I would have to rewatch it again to like, figure out how I feel about it today. But something that kind of leads into what I want to talk about next is like, especially since this is based on like the film was based on a real person's life. I have no doubt that the director and the actor and everyone like did a lot of research going into it, especially the actor. But something I want to talk about is, the actor is not autistic, and that was something that was really a big letdown when I watched the behind the scenes of that film, when I came to realize like the actress was just like, a neurotypical person. And I remember like liking the film up until I saw the behind the scenes. I was like, oh, this wasn't real. This was like, I remember being really let down by that as a kid, which is what I want to get into next. Maddie Ziegler's performance, because she is not autistic, and that's important to note. And I think what you were mentioning earlier about like Maddie Ziegler and Sia's relationship, they do a lot of projects together. Like she dances in a lot of her music. She has danced in the majority of her music videos, right? And I think something interesting was like, I think I mentioned earlier, but like Sia did mention that it was ableist of her not to cast an autistic person. And I guess in one way that is good that she's trying to hold herself accountable. But at the same time, she said that in an interview, but immediately after, basically the whole quote was something along the lines of, yeah, I guess it was kind of ableism, but it was also a nepotism because I don't want to do a project without Maddie. So it was like, okay, cool, you almost took accountability for what you did, but at the same time you also completely dismissed it because you were just like, no, I'm just nepotistic, I just really like Maddie specifically, and I don't want to do a project that doesn't involve her. So that's
involved her in
a different way, exactly. Yeah, exactly. She didn't have to be the main character, but they decided to do that because they didn't want to hire an autistic actor. And like, again, this is one of countless examples throughout the history of neurodiverse representation where autistic people are being played by neurotypical actors. Like I found this list on Wikipedia of like every film about autism. I guess a lot of representations of autism in film, and like I haven't gone through television because television is a different, has a little bit of a different history, and is arguably like a little bit better with representation than film. But like I literally tallied all of I tried to like narrow down all the demographics of every of like every autistic film with an autistic character that I could find, and I found exactly two examples of autistic actors playing autistic characters. One of them was like
how many?
Out of like, God, I think it was like a little less than 100. I don't think it was quite 100. It might have been like more like 80 or 90. But it was like that many films that I could think of. One of them was like a side character in like a British straight to TV movie that came out in like early-ish 2000s, and one of them was a Pixar short called Loop, which honestly highly
I've seen that.
You've seen that? Yeah, that was honestly, I watched that right after I watched music because like I literally kept coming upstairs to like vent about the film to my boyfriend like every like 20 minutes because I hated it so much. And then like we decided to watch that because we have Disney Plus, and we decided to watch that before watching our regular show, and I was like, this is so much better. Everything about this is just so much better.
That was a sweet short. I did like it.
Yeah, it was great. Anyway, sorry, going back to Maddie Ziegler, I'll definitely talk more about Loop later because I really love that. But again, like this, and again, I've heard some this Maddie Ziegler side of the story just from like internet. I don't know how much of it is true or not, but there's a lot of discourse online about how like she wasn't 100% comfortable depicting this character the way she did, but like, Sia was encouraging it, and the people around her were encouraging her to depict the autistic character in a certain way. Like there's a lot of her, like pressing out her buck teeth, like a lot. And that's a big caricature, like, a lot of autistic people, like that's definitely something I feel like, when I was like in middle school, elementary school, a lot of people would make that face at me to make me feel stupid and inferior to them, right? So that's something that you're putting on an autistic character, but it's a facial expression that has been used to like demean, and there's a lot of nuance to that. But that was something where I was like, oh God, you're trying to make her look quote unquote stupid, I guess, which is a lot to unpack. And it just really felt like a caricature of autistic people. people.
Right.
And like, but at the same time, part of it is like, you know, she mentioned that like, she, a lot of it was her like watching, words are hard, a lot of it, I also heard that like she watched a lot of YouTube videos of autistic people, which there's a lot to unpack there, like, because there are a lot of you know, there are a lot of parents that will on the internet that have posted, you know, how to film their autistic children, like, you know, like having meltdowns or in like really vulnerable states, but then they film it and then they post it on Facebook or YouTube to like gain sympathy points. And like a lot of it is without that person's consent. And not only is it without that person's consent, but it's also specifically you're showcasing an autistic person in their most vulnerable state, and then you're using that for your performance. And I don't really blame her that much. She's just 18, and she was probably forced in this role because Sia only wants to work with her for her projects. And like, again, you're like you said earlier, there might have been contract issues and stuff. Absolutely. Yada yada yada. So she probably was doing what she thought was best, but like that, you can definitely tell that it's just a lot, you know what I mean? It's a lot Absolutely. To unpack.
Yeah, and I want to prompt a question, because I have a question for sounds you good. About her performance. Mm-hmm. You're a low support individual. I guess, what is stimming to you, and what kind of stereotypes does Maddie Ziegler's performance highlight? What is the difference between stimming for like high support need individuals versus low support need individuals? Do you think it was, what exactly do you think is problematic about that? And then I have a question following that will lead into that.
Yeah. No, that's a great question. Something I should mention as well is like, well, stimming is definitely, when autistic people stim, it's a lot more noticeable, because autistic people will stim in ways that like isn't as like acceptable, but or if that makes sense. But everyone stims, if that, you know, I think I should mention that. Like words are hard. I have anxious friends, like people that just suffer with anxiety and not necessarily autism, but like they have like little fidget cubes, or they have like fidget spinners or whatever, because stimming is something that anyone can do to regulate their emotions, right? But it's because that autistic people, whether you have high support needs or low support needs, they experience much more intense sensory input. That's why their stimming might be more noticeable or strange, if that makes sense.
Yes.
And like different different people, there's no one right way to stim, or like there's literally you can genuinely stim in so many different ways, if that makes sense. Like, you know, most noticeably like physical stimming, like, you know, shaking your hands and stuff. That was something I used to do a lot, and I'm trying to like relearn it, honestly. Excuse me.
We've had issues with masking in the past, and we've had conversations about that in podcast episodes that have been scrapped. So I guess it's hard to remember what we've talked about on the podcast.
Exactly. That's true. Because like I'll find myself stimming a lot more, like because part of it, like something that I should say about, sorry if this is just like a PSA about stimming, not a PSA, but just me talking about stimming in general, but like you can stim for a lot of different reasons. Sometimes people stim when they're overwhelmed with their environment, so they just need to like regulate their emotions. But sometimes people stim when they're really excited. I found that I stim when I'm very excited. I just like jump up and down, like shake my hands, and I just get really, really excited. Also, vocal stimming is something that should be mentioned. And honestly, Maddie Ziegler in this film, she does both of those scenes. You can see her like stimming with her hands, but you can also hear her stimming with her mouth. And that's something that I do a lot as well. I don't know if I do it as much anymore, but it drove you and Mom crazy. Well, here's the thing. Sorry, I'm losing my voice. But I remember when I was a teenager, and probably younger than that, but like I would walk around the house and I would, you know how people will talk to themselves like when they don't think anyone's around? I would do that, except I would do that, but I wouldn't open my mouth. Like I would just be like, like that kind of thing. And I knew I would get so embarrassed when whenever anyone saw me doing it, mostly because I didn't have the language to explain what I was doing. I just thought it was being weird, and you guys probably thought it was being weird. Like I remember
I just don't think we understood, and to this day I still kind of like jokingly tease you about it.
I remember specifically one time, and like maybe it was just because like I had learned not to do it around our mom very often, or maybe I hadn't done it around our our mom very often, but I remember this was like when I was 16 or 17, and like we had moved to a house where like my mom's room was like across the hall, was like right next door to my room, and I was like doing that. I was like all by myself, so I thought I was okay, and I wasn't gonna like annoy anybody, but I was like doing that. I was talking to my room, and then mom, it was like late at night, and mom entered my room, and she was like, "What is that noise? I just hear a weird humming." And I was like, "I don't know. It's not me. I'm sorry."
I wonder what that is. I'm not sure. Maybe it might mysteriously end now, but
exactly. So that was interesting. I guess I had just not done it around her before, and she was really confused. Yeah. And I didn't know how to explain it to her what I was doing. So I was like, I don't know. So mom, if you're listening and you need to know what that was, sorry, your autistic daughter is just weird. And
no, your autistic daughter is just stimming.
It's just yeah, exactly. So anyway, what was the original question, I guess?
Sure. I guess what kind of, I don't know, I mean, just in general, like, so what that was stimming to you. And then, I guess the answer to the question is that it can be anything. I guess, do you think that there's anything particularly damaging about Maddie Ziegler's performance in terms of the way that she stims? Or do you think that that was just her trying to represent a high support needs autistic individual?
Right, that's fair. Well, I think my thing with it is, and maybe other autistic people would disagree with me on this, but I think, here's the thing, I think I have no doubt that like actors, like professional actors, like try and do a ton of research and try to like, you know, spend time with like the people they're trying to depict, like, you know, like especially with autism. I have no doubt that like, you know, neurotypical actors will spend a lot of time with neurodiverse people and like learn about how they move and how they use their voice and how they speak and all that stuff. I have no doubt that like she probably tried her best to learn how autistic people move their bodies and like that kind of thing, because you know it seems like, I don't know how to explain it. Like she seems to be like she is stimming. That's like, you know, that's something undeniable. And like she's vocal stimming as well, and she's making noises with her voice that do kind of represent, you know, autistic people with high support needs. The problem is because we all know that she's not autistic. At least we're all under the assumption that she's a neurotypical girl, and because of that, it comes off as a caricature. It doesn't come off as authentic, no matter how much research you put into it, because everyone knows that she's not an autistic person, and that she, you know, she doesn't experience the world where she has to self-regulate that intensely, or she has to like make these noises with her voice because like it comes as second nature to her. It just doesn't, and that's where the problem lies. Because like, you know, I think that's important. I think it's just it's 2021 and we're still casting neurotypical people to be in neurodiverse films, and I just think that needs to stop. Basically, does that make sense?
Yes. And I have two questions for you. I guess I'll ask this one first. I guess my question is, if Sia had made the choice to, instead of casting Maddie Ziegler, I keep forgetting how to pronounce her last name.
It's okay. It's okay.
If she had chose not to cast Maddie and instead maybe cast a low support need autistic individual, do you think it would have been more problematic had Sia asked that low support needs autistic individual to act as if they were high support needs? Do you think that it would have made it better, or do you think it would have made it worse because you're basically asking an autistic individual to be a caricature of another type of autistic like, do you think that, because I don't want to go as I guess it's complicated because there's the argument that exists that even if Sia wanted to hire a high support need autistic individual, that person would not have been physically able to cooperate in filming, right? I'm not saying that's necessarily what I believe.
That's
but
the argument. That's why directors don't want to work with neurodiverse people, is because they're scared they're not going to be able to like, they're not going to, you know, that'll be challenging, and it will. But that's the thing with like when you want to tell a story about disabilities or disabled people. What you have to do is like, I think that's a good question, because like I don't think words are hard. I think maybe I think to a degree it might have been a little more problematic if she had hired like someone with some more low support needs to play a character that is more high support needs. To a degree, I think it would have been better, but just hire someone with more high support needs. Like, I think this is a great segue into talking about Loop, which is that Pixar short that I was talking about earlier. But that film was made. That film stars and the voice actress for that is a nonverbal high support needs autistic woman. And what they did, the behind the scenes of that is really interesting, because what they did was like they brought this girl into the studio and it became really apparent that she was kind of overwhelmed with the new environment. But instead of being like, you know what, this is too hard, let's hire someone that isn't actually autistic, they recorded her voice in her house. They made accommodations for her in a way that made her feel more comfortable. So they brought all the recording equipment to this girl's house, and they got sounds from her that would have portrayed the animated character on screen that they were trying to depict. Does that make sense?
Yes,
so it's
absolutely.
literally about making accommodations for people with disabilities. Like, if you care so much about, again, like I said, she kept saying this is like, again, going back to her quote, like this film is a love letter to the autistic community. It's not, because if it was, you would have hired an autistic actor and you would have made the accommodations necessary to make them feel safe and comfortable on your set, right?
Yes, and that is an interesting thought, because I bet the reason why she didn't is because she couldn't. Because the set was meant to be
like disorienting,
like
flashing lights, that kind of thing.
So again, this brings me back to my point of, it would have been so much easier and you wouldn't have been able to get your point across had you not had an autistic individual as your main character.
Yeah,
but
that's fair.
I don't know if that's problematic to say, but in the sense of like, you could have just had a young child who was anxious, right? Or
had anxiety. Like, maybe if we're going with that, maybe it could have been like, a neurotypical person, but like maybe say they were a musical prodigy, like they were very passionate about music, and that's how they saw the world, but they didn't necessarily need to be autistic, right?
It's
and then everything else would have been fine if it wasn't. I do think I kind of disagree with you in the sense of like, it seems like disability is a big part of it, but if it had just been rewritten to not be about disability but about, I don't know how to explain it, but basically I agree with you to an extent, yeah.
I guess it's frustrating because you talk about how it's difficult because Sia probably felt like she could not hire a high support needs autistic individual, but the reason why is because her set and the story she was trying to tell with the visuals she was trying to depict were too much for an autistic individual to handle. Does that not defeat the purpose of your entire movie? If you are making a movie about an autistic individual who sees the world in a way that would be damaging for an autistic viewer to watch,
right?
I feel like it defeats the purpose of what you're trying to say.
I totally agree.
Maybe I'm not in a position to say that, maybe there are autistic individuals that see the world that way, right? Maybe I don't know the answer to that. I can't speak to that.
That's fair.
But I feel like she completely undermined what she was trying to do by not only ignoring the autistic community, but also depicting her main character in such a way that would be damaging for an audience member who is autistic, right? Like you said, it physically cannot be a love letter to the autistic community if those people can't even watch it. So it's like she feels like she can't even hire a high support needs autistic individual as her main actress for that reason. It's like it just doesn't make sense,
Yeah. It makes me think about how we haven't talked much about this, but I think it's important to note, like, after like the trailer or the teaser was released, a lot of people in the autistic community already knew it was going to be bad, knew it was going to be inappropriate and like not a good representation. And Sia on Twitter was extremely defensive and completely unprofessional. And I think that's important to note. But like, specifically what it makes me think of is like one thing. This is so offensive that you kind of have to laugh at some point. But like, obviously she was very defensive toward any autistic people that were trying to tell her that it was kind of not going to be, it was that they didn't appreciate what yada yada yada. But specifically the one interaction that she had on Twitter that stands out in my mind is is like, basically there was an autistic person who tweeted at her like, hey, I'm an autistic actor, there's a really big community of autistic actors, you could have reached out to any of us and we would have been happy to be in your movie, right? And her response to that was, maybe you're just a bad actor. Which is a lot.
Yeah.
So sorry, I thought I cut out for a minute.
I was reading what she said.
But anyway, fast forward to when the film actually came out. Autistic people are reviewing it. I've seen like one TikTok, like a couple TikToks and like one film review where the reviewer made the joke of like, maybe you're just a bad director because she didn't hire an autistic person because she didn't think she could handle it, which is because she's a bad director. Which I get it. It's her first film, but that's no excuse to like, I don't know, turn down a challenge like that, because it would be a challenge to direct someone who has a different mind than you, who does see the world differently and experiences the world differently than you. But it just, yeah, I mean, that it was just, she was being rude and to autistic people, so now we're just gonna be rude back and tell her maybe she's just a bad director. And I just like that. It's just a joke that I'm entertained by.
Right. And to further, explain my point, I just looked up like the tweets concerning this issue from Sia. Again, you don't know if it's like fabricated or whatnot. I did find a photo that says, somebody that was criticizing her, and Sia said, I actually tried working with a beautiful young girl, nonverbal on the spectrum, and she found it unpleasant and stressful. So that's why I wonder why. Maddie. Yeah. Why do you think it was unpleasant and stressful, Sia?
Yeah.
That I feel like that's like the big thing. I don't know.
Yeah. There was one film review I watched where like that whole story she had seemed really fuzzy, because it was like, okay, you said that you tried to work with a nonverbal person, but at the same time she also said that she wrote this film specifically for Maddie because she doesn't want, yeah, because
really?
like she doesn't, because like genuinely there's like, maybe I'll send this to you later, but like there, like she has said on multiple occasions that she only likes working with Maddie Ziegler on any of her projects, to the point where she also has like has attempted to like keep Maddie from working on other people's projects because she only wants to work with her. It's a very weird relationship, but I also don't know enough about it to go too hard in that, but I think it's important to mention, like, she only wants to work with Maddie Ziegler.
Right.
And it's a lot. It's a bit weird. She's a weird lady.
Yeah, so to ask the second part of my question concerning all of this, what differentiates this movie from... Again, this is not how I feel. I'm just bringing it up for the purpose of having this conversation with somebody who actually should be talking about it and should have like the stage about it. What differentiates this movie from a movie where someone who doesn't have a disease plays a diseased person? Or like somebody on Instagram I saw made this argument, like bringing up roles like Leonardo DiCaprio and like What's Eating Gilbert Grape. That's an example of, I suppose, what makes this movie, I mean, that's just one example, right? But what makes this movie, different than any other neurotypical neurotypical actor playing a neurodivergent actor? Where does the line end? Like, why did Sia cross the line here? Exactly.
A lot of ways. Well, I mean, specifically, Again, the big thing is, like, you're hiring a person who isn't autistic to play an autistic character. And that's like I said, it's something that comes up a lot. Like, Leonardo DiCaprio is not autistic, and he played an autistic. I need to rewatch that film, but like, I don't know if I've ever seen that film actually, but I know that either I don't remember if he's explicitly, actually, I'm going to look it up. I
think he's a
the character
high support
is
needs autistic individual.
Okay,
my
gotcha.
Remembrance of the film.
Yeah. Okay, but yeah, like if you're explicitly saying that, then you should have it be played by an autistic person, right? And like I think you mentioned like a disease. I don't know much about how I was
thinking about specifically when I was writing this question, I was thinking about Eddie Redmayne. Not only he played the transgender woman, which I feel like is a different conversation.
It is a different conversation
because it is a different conversation. But also things like, I suppose the theory of everything should not be brought up in this situation, but it is a disability, right?
Yeah, that's interesting. That's more like neurological disability, and like that's a good question. It's not really the same thing as autism,
it really
but
isn't.
That's a good question. I think it makes me think a little bit about like, I guess I know a little bit less about that because like you know, I wonder if like it would like should for example, The Fault in Our Stars, should the actors in that have had cancer?
Yeah,
I
that's
guess
a good point.
That's
Right.
I don't know if that's what should have happened. I guess I don't know enough about the community of people that have cancer and have like a diseases like that, and if they believe that, you know, it would be, you know, it would be important for that kind of representation. I honestly don't know, because there's a lot more nuance in that conversation. I just don't know.
I mean,
but I think but I think the important distinction, and I know you're not implying this, but I think the important distinction is like autism isn't a disease. It's a lifelong disability. And I think, you know, I think that's why I wouldn't care if someone who maybe doesn't struggle, if an actor who doesn't struggle with anxiety played a character with an anxiety disorder, right? Mm-hmm. Because anxiety and depression and all that stuff, I feel like obviously an actor can, if that has that stuff, would probably bring more to the role, but that's more of like something that I guess that comes in like ebbs and flows. I have an anxiety disorder, and that doesn't affect my life every single day. Maybe I go through like phases of my life where it's a lot worse than normal, but like there's like a difference. Like I remember we had a conversation with one of our friends who when we like went to visit Florida like a year or two ago. But yeah, we were talking to our friend who has OCD. We were just hanging out in a furrier shop, and she was mentioning her OCD and how different things trigger her and stuff. And we were I don't know how, but I guess we were mentioning mental illnesses, and I just happened to bring up autism and like my autism, and she had a question that was like, oh well, what triggers it? What triggers your autism? And that was a really good question, because it was like, well, you know, nothing triggers it because it's just always there. And
nothing
I think
and everything, you know.
Yeah, exactly. And I think anyone with a disability can attest to this, because like anyone, even whether it's physical disability or mental disability, it's a very integral part of your identity, because it's something you struggle with on a day-to-day basis. Maybe if it's a mental disability, then it's less fit. You don't see it as often, especially if someone can mask really well, but it's a very important part of their identity that they are just, you know, like, you know what I mean? So I think, did that answer the question? I hope I did.
I guess
where did see across the line? I think it literally just comes down to you should hire people. You know, right. You can't tell stories about disability because you want to just put out this inspiration porn for neurotypical audiences to feel better about themselves, sure. Right?
I suppose the answer, if there is like a correct answer, right, is like, you know, a lot of the arguments that I saw online were, you know, What's Eating Gilbert Grape didn't get canceled, Rain Man didn't get canceled, right?
Well, that's a good point, but that's something I should mention too. Rain Man specifically, and I think, you know, What's Eating Gilbert Grape was kind of pretty early on as well. I think it came out like 80s, 90s or something along those lines.
I'm not sure, but yeah.
But Rain Man specifically, that was it was not the first film to depict autism on screen, but it was the first big budget film to depict autism on screen. So as far as visibility goes, it is a very important film, because before that, a lot of people didn't know much about autism in general. And that's the thing though, as far as visibility goes, it did a good job in regards of that, because it made more people aware of autism, and was like one of the main characters being autistic. And I think the visibility was very important for autistic people to see themselves in some capacity on screen. And it's not a perfect film, and it doesn't, you know, depict autism as authentically as it could. But the reason I feel like it wasn't canceled, quote unquote, is because it was one of the first things to tell a story like that. And for that reason, it was very beneficial. And kind of similar to What's Eating Gilbert Grape, that was also a very big budget film. Literally Johnny Depp and freaking Leonardo DiCaprio were in it, and it was like, you know, a similar situation. It was not a good representation, but, you know, it wasn't a great representation, but it, visibility wise, because it was one of the first films to do it, then, you know, that was a good thing, right? But the reason the reason this film is getting canceled, quote unquote, that word is a lot, but the reason this film is facing so much more criticism is because it's 2021. We understand, you know, the autistic community is much more vocal, and we, especially with the internet, you know, like we are being able, I feel like ever since the internet, really, like the autistic community has been able to express themselves a lot more, especially non-verbal people who can now, you know, use a computer to articulate their feelings and stuff on the internet. And like, you know, as technology advances and stuff, we have a much better understanding of what autism is, and like, you know, the nuances and stuff. so when films like this come out that are very clearly inspiration porn to make, that is misrepresentation, and it isn't an autistic person playing the role, that's why this film is facing more scrutiny. It's because, I mean, it's 2021, right? That's the main thing.
No, yeah, I think the answer to that question of, why didn't those films get canceled, is because they served a purpose, which is visibility, and also it was less understood at the time. I think, like you said, music is not only does something, it does what those movies tried to do in a world where those people actually have a voice, right? When those movies came out, it was as if the only voice for those individuals, even though they were being depicted on screen, which is good,
exactly,
through that, their voice was through the director, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Now Sia is trying to make a similar movie in a world where the autistic people have that voice. It's not just the directors, it's not just the neurotypical people gatekeeping the voices, the voices of the neurodivergent people, I guess. But it's complicated. And also, I think that despite all of that, right, just because we're saying that doesn't necessarily mean that the directors or the casting directors of those films are without blame necessarily. Like, they could have, but they didn't, that maybe they didn't understand. But we live in a society where you don't have a choice but to understand. If you're going to make a movie like that, you can't just do it because you want to. You have to get it. You have to talk to the right people. You have to do your research. You can't just talk to Autism Speaks and they say, oh, that's great. I'm not sure if that's actually 100% what happened. Not the point. It
was weird. Like, supposedly Autism Speaks, like, had a hand in the film, but, like, it wasn't until after the film was made. So it was just weird. Either way, allegedly. Autism Speaks is garbage. But
either way, allegedly, whatever. The point is, the reason why is because Sia lives in a different world than the directors of What's Eating Gilbert Grape and Rain Man, I guess.
When you're living in a world where the autistic community does have a voice, you can't just not listen to it because it doesn't fit your aesthetic. Like, that's a problem.
Absolutely, 100%. I think that's the main problem. I think it's less about Maddie Ziegler's performance, even though that is problematic, right? But it's less about not listening to the people that you're trying to depict. And it's almost implying that even if she wanted to know what they had to say about it, she couldn't, right? But she could. She just thinks that she couldn't,
Right, exactly.
But I think that's a really great way to kind of wrap up that part of the conversation.
Yeah, totally. I had like two more kind of big points, I suppose, and then...
Well, the thing is we've been talking for a long time, and we haven't even talked about the restriction scenes at all.
Yeah. Okay. I hope
do you want to wait, or do you want to talk about...
I really want to talk about it. I'm sorry. I only have two more things. Okay. I guess, well, before I talk about that, I think there's one more thing I'll touch on really quickly, but this is, again, another, like, common, theme and, like, a lot of depictions of autism in media, but infantilization. And this isn't something that I've heard a lot of people talking about, which is why I wanted to talk about. But, like, the specific scene that I remember that I was like, that, again, this is another example of, like, this film was clearly not made for autistic people. It was made for neurotypical people. But there's a scene where, like, Zoo, I don't remember if this is a show she watches every night. Basically, music, like, at the end of every night before she goes to bed, she watches this children's show. Like, she's watching, you can tell she's watching a show with, like, very goofy character, words are hard. Like, it looks like a children's show, and, like, the adults are wearing, like, very goofy monster costumes and that kind of thing. And it was interesting because, like, she's a teenager, like, obviously, I don't know, like, I'm not saying that autistic people don't watch children's shows, I guess, but, like, it just felt really infantilizing when, like, I feel like if you wanted to depict this character, like more realistically, at this point in the film, we've already established that she has words are hard. She has a special interest in regards to, like, animals and, like, specifically dogs. So maybe, like, every night she could have been watching something about dogs or animals, or, like, Animal Planet, or, like, maybe this dog show, dog training show she really likes on Discovery Channel, or I don't know. But I feel like if you wanted to depict, you actually wanted to depict it in a more realistic way, then you would have like shown her watching something that related to her special interest more, right? Like,
yes, it would have been very easy for her to use that to talk about, you know, autistic individuals and hyperfixation, but she chose not to.
She chose not to. She chose to show her watching a children's show, to assume that, like, it goes back to, like, it makes me think about another, I think this is a line that Ebo said at some point, but he was talking to Zoo, and he was like, emotionally, you and her are very close in age, and it was like, what the hell does that mean? That's horrible. And, like, I don't know, it just felt really infantilizing. It's like, you know, autistic people become adults, right? That's something that it doesn't come across a lot, you know what I mean? Like, it's very, I don't know how to explain it. Like, I feel like I personally, like, from my experience, I was babied my entire life because of my developmental disability. So I just remember, like, you know, eventually growing up and, like, my first day on, like, a college campus, I remember just thinking to myself, how did I get here? Like, am I smart enough to be here? Am I allowed to be here? Like that, like the insecurity that autistic people feel that, like, they're not smart enough or they're not intelligent enough to, like, exist in certain situations is, like, very real. Like, that's a really big, and I don't know if every autistic person has this insecurity, but I absolutely have the insecurity that I'm not developmentally, like, you know, strong enough, or I'm not emotionally old enough to, like, participate in certain conversations, but I just have a brain that works differently than others. But Absolutely. It just feels so infantilizing when you see autism depicted in that way, where, like, they're basically just children that don't have real interests outside of, so it just was really gross, and I'm not a big fan, not a fan.
Right, and I'm so sorry. I'm about to ask a very tone-deaf question.
Okay, that's fine.
For the purpose of having the conversation, right?
Yes.
Again, this is not how I feel. Massive, massive disclaimer, right?
Yes.
Because, you know, I grew up with you, you know, I get it. I'm not, like, a jerk.
Right, yeah.
In reference, yes, I did make a big point. I did make a point in my notes about this part. In reference to the red scene, there's, like, a scene where there's, like, a bunch of reds and pinks, and it happens after she's watching her show, I think. Mm-hmm. I think the idea that Sia's trying to get across is that music has to take everything into her brain as in this, like, romanticized TV perfect way. Like, I think the scene where she's dancing with Ebo and Zoo in like the red. Do you know exactly what I'm talking about?
I'm like, trying to remember.
There's one music video where they're dancing after she had watched her show, and I think that it's insulting at the same time, because the song that goes behind that scene is, like, the lyrics, I don't know exactly what the lyrics are, right? But it repeats constantly 1 + 1. And I thought that was disturbing. And, like, there are a bunch of, like, colorful shapes and, you know, whatever. It felt as if I were watching a child's show, watching that scene with that song backing it. But I think that's kind of disturbing, but no, that's a really good point. No, I don't know how to ask the question without sounding totally tone deaf.
I won't hate you. It's okay. I know you're being devil's advocate right now.
Right. I don't know exactly how to. Okay, let's just say, is it, from your perspective, what does a high support needs, like, autistic brain, like, kind of look like? Is it tone deaf of me to say that it, like, mocks the potential, like, quote unquote little intelligence she has, because I don't know, you know what I mean? Do you know what I'm trying to say?
I think so. I mean, again, like, I think it's hard for me because, again, like I said, I have low support needs. I don't know what it's like to have, like, very high support needs, and I don't know what it's like to not, you know, to need that support and not be able to live by myself necessarily. But I think, I don't know. I think it is a thing where, like, you know, you assume everything about, you know, autistic representation is, like, you're simultaneously, like, it's interesting because it's, like, it makes me think about this one, like, film that I watched, like, from the 80s. It's, like, it had a lower budget and stuff, so it didn't reach as many people, but it's called The Boy Who Could Fly, and there's a lot of problems with it in general, but specifically it makes me think about how, like, it's a very tone deaf film, but it makes me think about it stars a nonverbal autistic character. The actor is not autistic, but the character is nonverbal, and like there's a lot of discourse about like everyone around him thinks he's stupid and like uses the R slur against him, but the main character is supposedly like different because she likes him and she wants to be his friend, and like she's like, oh, but what if there's something more there? And it's like, so a lot of it's like, you know, it's a lot of, you know, that's where a lot of the inspiration porn comes from, is you're taking someone who like and I think Sia like had an Sia had an interview with an interviewer who basically said something along the lines of like, yeah, you know, this character, she might as well be like a lamppost or something to that effect. She said like she might as well be like a lamppost or like an inanimate object, the way she just sits there, but there's actually a lot more going on. And it's like, it's not deep to say that autistic people are people, right? So you know, it's not as progressive as you think it is to say like, oh wow, you might think this person is an absolute idiot who has nothing going on in their brain and they're just a big freaking dum-dum, but they're actually so special and cool. It's not as progressive as you think it is. Like, we're just normal people. I'm just more sensitive to sounds and textures and stuff, if that makes sense.
Right. But yes, I totally agree with that. I have like a question, but I don't know exactly how to frame it and word it. I don't want to imply that people who are nonverbal and high support needs are stupid, like you said.
Totally, exactly.
But
it's a different kind of intelligence, and they express their intelligence in a different way. That doesn't mean every autistic person is a prodigy at everything, but, you know, a lot of autistic people are very valuable, every autistic person is valuable, every person is valuable. I don't know how to explain, I don't know how to articulate that. I don't know why
it's a question. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
I think that it's from a neurotypical ignorance, you know? It's basically just neurotypical ignorance. I guess it's just confusing because I don't want to imply that music as a character is stupid in any way. Like, obviously,
exactly,
I don't think so. But from the perspective of a neurotypical world, what would be a better way to depict their communication with her? What would be what would be less tone deaf on Sia's part even if like you've decided, okay, I'm gonna use a because the thing is it's complicated because you want autistic representation, as I said. When people like Sia come along and they want to tell an autistic story, how can they do that with I guess you just need to be accommodating to high supports needs autistic individual. I don't know. I guess it's just confusing in that sense. I'm sure I sound totally like
no, it's okay
right now, but I don't know exactly what the question is or what the answer would be. You know, I don't know how to approach. I guess maybe that's my neurotypical ignorance, not knowing how I would approach working with a high support need individual, how I would go about understanding that person. Go ahead. Yeah.
I mean, you just have to get to know autistic people. Again, like I said earlier, like if you've met one autistic person, you've met one autistic person. Yeah. And it's about getting to know them and like, you know, getting to know what they're sensitive to, what makes them tick, and like, but also what makes them comfortable and feel safe in a certain environment, and like make them feel heard and listened to. And also like maybe I'm not saying that, you know, neurotypical people shouldn't direct stories about autism, but like hire more autistic directors, let autistic people tell their own stories. That would be amazing. And like it makes me think about a really good representation. I still have yet to watch this show. I'm probably going to watch it pretty soon, but Everything Is Gonna Be Okay is a sitcom on Hulu, and it's about you know, that's a show that like stars an autistic actress, like an actually, I think she plays a autistic person with more low support needs, but yeah, she's an actually autistic person, and she and the director are very close, and like they you know, she expresses herself, and she expresses how she feels like her character would react in certain situations, and like she tries to like, you know, she has a voice on the show, and like she expresses how, you know what I mean, like she's very much a part of the story. I don't know how to explain it, but she's she has a voice on the set, she feels comfortable on set, and like all this stuff. So that's a really, and like the show is great from what I've heard. Again, I'm gonna watch it soon. I'm very, very, very excited because it's so wholesome too. Like, oh my god, like I've seen like little montage of it, like montage clips of it on Instagram, and it's just so funny. Like my favorite line that I've seen is like, you know, one of the lines in the show is like the girl, it says like, hi, my name is, what's her name, Matilda, I think her name, the character's name is Matilda. She's like, hi, my name's Matilda, I'm autistic, my dad's biggest regret is vaccinating me, that was a joke. And it's like, it's so wholesome and sweet, and I just want to watch it so bad.
I have seen clips of that too. It looks very funny and cute. Yeah. Like, there are some really raunchy clips that I've seen of that show that have just cracked me up.
It just makes me feel so much, like, it's so much better than, like, something like Big Bang Theory, where, like, the butt of the joke is, like, he's just rude all the time and doesn't understand social cues. But like autistic people can be funny because they don't understand social cues, but also because they're also very self-aware. I don't know how to explain it.
It's not autistic people can be funny, not in a antagonizing or
like I'm the butt of the joke kind of way, but in a way of like being not self-aware.
Like what is the word I'm thinking of? Not in a you're not wanting to patronize.
Yeah, exactly.
Not, like, you can be funny because you're funny, not because, oh, you're so cute because you're autistic. You know
exactly.
I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess I just wanted to open that conversation of, like, how do you amplify a high support need voice in a world where she doesn't have one, you know? But
yeah. I mean, just be accommodating to actors is what it comes down to.
And Sia, I think, actively chose not to do that.
Yeah, pretty much. She didn't care.
Actively chose not to. And that's the problem, right?
Exactly. Anyway, this has been a very long episode. And if you want to talk about more than you can, the last thing I have on my list is the restraint scenes, which they have been talked about a lot, so we can just brush over that. But like, don't restrain autistic people. It happens twice in this film. I didn't even know it happened twice. I just knew it happened like once, but they restrain this girl 2 different times, and it's seen as this like acceptable thing. It's not. It's dangerous. It's killed autistic people before. Don't restrain autistic people, and that's all I have to say about that.
Okay. No, I was curious. Yeah. Because, again, I was trying to go into the film as open-minded as possible, trying not to be biased. Yeah. But as soon as that scene came on, it was too much. I could not stay impartial watching that. It was deeply disturbing.
Absolutely.
Deeply disturbing. Because if I didn't know anything about autistic individuals, if I had just never experienced that in my life and I was totally blind to it, I would feel a lot of frustration and relate to Zoo watching music freak out, because it's like, as a neurotypical person dealing with a neurodivergent person, you don't know how to deal with that. Your immediate distinction is just like trying to get them to stop, you know? It's like,
and it's interesting too, because it's like, exactly. It's like the first time it happens, I guess trigger warning if you don't want us to go into it too much, and I'll try to be brief, I promise, but the first time it happens, they're in her apartment, and like she is like throwing scenes because she's overwhelmed and stuff, and she's stimming to the point where she is hitting herself a little bit, and I think that's important to mention too. Like, stimming is mostly safe and understandable, but sometimes if an individual is really overwhelmed, then sometimes it can become self-injurious behavior, and that's where you might want to intervene. You want to safely intervene, but yes, you should probably try and intervene, because you don't want people you love to hurt themselves, even if they're doing it by mistake. But again, that's not. And then like right after that, Ebo decides that he wants to freaking he just tackles her, and like he presses her down, and what he says is he's crushing her with his love, and it's just so weird. It's seen as this like normal thing, and it's like it's not normal, and it shouldn't be acceptable. And like she's clearly like upset, and like she's clearly overwhelmed, and like so restraining her is not gonna help. And then the second time it happens, it's seen as this like they are in a public place, but at the same time all she's doing is stimming. She's not hurting anybody. I think that's what's really important to say. Like, she's not hurting anybody. I don't remember if the second time she was like being self-injurious by mistake, but she's not hurting anybody, right? And she just happened to be stimming very like vocally and being very loud and stuff. So in that case, like it's a big emotional moment where like the sister is like, oh, can you do that thing? And he's like, no, you have to do it this time. And then she does it, and she's like, wow, I'm really figuring out how to help my autistic sister. And it's like, no, you're not. No, you're not. You're hurting her. It's like God. And like that's like the last public statement that Sia put out, I believe, before just deleting her Twitter. But like she put out this statement like, this film does not approve of like, well, I can't remember the specific word, but like condone, I think. This film does not condone restricting autistic people. And it's like, you wouldn't have put that out if you didn't have if you didn't get backlash from it. She wouldn't have. Like,
she wouldn't have. But and also, it shows that she just didn't do the research. I mean, if you are a neurotypical person and you've never dealt with an autistic person before, your instinctual reaction might be to do that. And it shows that the movie is completely tone deaf to its audience, in that you are showing something that is harmful and depicting it in such a way that it shows everybody who's watching, neurodivergent or neurotypical, that is okay. And you're setting that precedent that could hurt people. Like, say,
it's killed autistic people before.
Say that I am a young woman and I watch this movie because I love Sia, right? I love Sia, and I watch the movie and I don't know anything about the autistic community, and in a few years, I have a child and that child is autistic, and then like, I get it. It's like, oh, Sia doesn't feel responsible for that because she was just trying to tell a story. But stories and media plant things in brains, right? You can't just pretend like say I'm that person and I have an autistic child later on in life. I might mistakenly dig up the memories from watching this movie and do that to my child and potentially kill them, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Like, I understand that you're just trying to tell a story, but you can't. It's disturbing and it is harmful, right?
Yes.
That was it was very disturbing to watch that happen.
Absolutely, it was terrible and unacceptable. That was everything I want to talk about. I know we are really late, but like, is there anything else you want to talk about as well before we wrap up?
How many hours are we at now?
We are almost at an hour and a half.
Okay, well, I have like a few more questions.
Yeah, that's fine.
Rapid fire though.
Yeah, let's rapid fire. Let's go. Go hard. Yes.
You're still recording, right?
Yes,
still
I am.
I just wanted to make sure because we did pause at one point.
Okay. Rapid fire question time?
Yeah, rapid fire question.
All right.
And then I have some final thoughts.
Okay.
So let's see. Let's see where I am. Okay, what are your thoughts on the scene where she's putting music into the home and then decided she wasn't going to? When Zoo decided she was going to take her into the home and then decided against it at the last moment. Do you think that was irresponsible of her? Do you think that it would have been more what are your thoughts on homes in general? For what are your thoughts on that?
That's a good question. I mean, okay, sorry, I'll try and be quick. But again, I've mentioned this, but I have more low support needs, so I don't think I would. It's not something I've looked into because I don't think. I don't know. I just don't know much about that world, I guess, because I don't know if homes for autistic people are a good idea. Maybe they are, and it is a safe place for them, and they are surrounded by people that can take care of them in a good way. But at the same time, maybe they're really. I honestly don't know if that's the case or if they're actually very harmful and dangerous. It makes me think briefly about, this isn't about autism, but it makes me think about this film I watched a couple months ago called Peanut Butter Falcon, and that stars a man with Down syndrome, and that's actually a really good movie. I would highly recommend it. I really enjoyed it. But it was interesting because I didn't realize that man actually ends up, he lives in a nursing home because the government doesn't know where else to put him, quote unquote, to where he can. It's interesting because it's there are some situations where we don't live in a perfect world where where every place that wherever you place a disabled person that needs to live with some, we don't live in a perfect world where that's always the best idea. So I guess I don't know. I guess I didn't see much of the environment in the film to know whether or not it was a very dangerous place for her to be. But I don't know. I guess that's just my thoughts. I don't know if that would have been a good idea or not, just because I don't know much about the world of autistic people living in homes. I guess it's just not something I know a lot about, so I don't want to speak on that was a terrible idea or that was actually a great idea. I'm just not sure, I guess, if that makes sense.
No, I get that. I actually only have one more question, then we can kind of wrap up. I thought I had more questions, but I went through. So, and the ending of the movie. Where she kind of at the wedding, Ebo is playing the piano, and when Zoo started to sing, it was actually music, right? Do you think that the ending perpetuates a misguided ideal that autistic individuals can just be quote-unquote normal if they try, or do you think it was like a sweet moment? What are your thoughts there?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know. It was definitely weird. I think a lot of internal damage that, like, psychologically that autistic people experience throughout their life is feeling like they need to be normal. Like, whether, like, at least from my perspective of, like, being more low functioning, like, you know, I had a lot of insecurities about not feeling normal enough as I was growing up, and that's why I masked so much of my life, and, like, I tried to suppress, like, my stimming, and I tried to suppress, you know, I tried to mimic the way other people spoke to each other so I could just appear normal in those situations. But I definitely don't think we should be forcing a right way to behave in society on people. I think people should just exist the way they're most comfortable and most happy, and they shouldn't face any judgment or expectations from the outside world to, like, make them conform a certain way, right? Like, yeah.
Absolutely.
That's how I feel about that, I guess.
I felt weird by the end. This is a very odd cross-reference here, but the ending kind of mimicked... do you remember the ending of Scrooged?
Oh my god. Yeah, oh my god. Yeah, you're right. That is big, like, God blesses everyone mood.
It was mad God blesses everyone energy.
Vibes.
And, I don't know, because I feel like it definitely... It was reminiscent of... it's complicated, because... at first I was like, oh, what a sweet moment. She's, like, singing and whatever. But I don't know. I thought it was sweet, right? But I don't think...
I mean, she does seem to be a character that isn't completely nonverbal. Like, she's mostly nonverbal, but she does speak sometimes, which is sometimes the case. A lot of people are like that. But, like, I don't know. It does seem like... I don't know. It feels like when people, again, like, to talk about that one, like, really old movie, like The Boy Who Could Fly or whatever, like, by the end of that movie, he hasn't spoken the entire film until the very end when he, like, decides to fly away and stuff. And it's supposed to be, like, this, it's like that's how directors want to, like, want to show character development, is showing, like, hey, they used to not talk, but now they can talk, or they used to only say a few words, but now they can sing, and it's so magical and cool, and it's like, I mean, it's just stupid. It's like
it's frustrating because, yes, sure, you know, that I think that is the definition of inspiration porn for, like you were talking about, but it's like autistic individuals, I feel, don't have to have that moment in order to be valid and accepted, right?
Yeah, exactly. I completely agree.
It's complicated, but yeah, that I thought that was the ending was interesting. Anyway, so what are your, like, final, like, wrap up thoughts about the film?
It's a bad movie. Don't go see it unless you're like me and you're writing a capstone paper about it, or you want to talk about it on your podcast.
Right.
But oh god, yeah, it's somehow a lot worse than I expected it to be. It's just bad, and like some of it has to do with it being a debut film by a debut director, but part of it is literally just because, like, I mean, it's just bad representation and it's inspiration porn, and it's like, it's clearly was not made by someone who cares about the autistic community. It's very apparent that that is not the case, and I guess that's my I guess the only thing I have to say is, like, watch good autistic content. I guess
do you have any recs?
Go watch Loop, that short film. It's great. It's
L-O-O-P.
Yes, on Disney. It's on Disney Plus. It's a short film. It's great. Watch Everything Is Gonna Be Okay. Again, actually autistic person starring in it. It's great.
Community.
I'm looking. Yes, watch Community. That's also interesting. That's just I won't get into why that's a good representation because we've already been talking too much. But Abed Nadir is a great autistic character. He's very well written. He's awesome. And those are my big recs. Okay. Anyway, I guess that's all I have to say.
Okay, yeah, so I have a couple, like, closing thoughts.
Yes.
I guess I'm just gonna read exactly what I have on my paper.
Yes.
So my overall thoughts are, I understand what the movie's trying to do, right? I don't think this was intentionally a blatant misrepresentation of the autistic community on Sia's part. I don't think that was, like, her goal. But I think that in her mind, she had a romanticized idea of what she wanted. She wanted to depict, like, a young, quote-unquote autistic girl who used music as a coping mechanism, who, like, saw the world in bright colors and things like that. But the movie was basically just, she wanted to play to her strengths. She wanted to write songs and choreography that was beautiful and intricate dances to the songs. I don't think she cared about the plot as much as she cared about the music. She had an idea of what she wanted her like ideal quote unquote autistic brain to look like. So actually hiring an autistic actor would prohibit her artistic vision, right? If you purposefully ignore culture when you appropriate it, then it's as if you're not appropriating it. You can make it anything you want. If you ignore it, then it's as if, oh, you're not doing anything wrong, right? Because you're just making a film. It makes me sad because Sia is an incredibly talented individual. She has an incredible voice. Her music is enjoyable, whatever. But it doesn't matter how talented you are. If you refuse to give a voice to those who you are romanticizing, then every single good message you try to put out into the world will always fall flat. That's my closing thoughts.
Yep, good stuff. I'm so sorry this episode was so long. If you made it this far, thank you.
Thank you for listening. I really liked the conversations.
Me too. Me too.
I really thought it was good.
Good stuff.
Anyway, thank you guys for listening. We overreacted big time.
Oh, absolutely.
We'll see you next week, hopefully.
Okay, bye.